On the amateur radio bands all around the world every week, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first podcasts on the internet, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1415 of This Week in Amateur Radio. Radio clubs all around the earth will activate in April for the 2026 World Amateur Radio Day celebration. The ARRL announces changes in the Central Division leadership. The FCC sends a notice of unlicensed operation to an ISP in California. The Commission is poised to empower superfast broadband from orbit. Elecraft donates a complete amateur radio station to the League and W1AW. The Department of Defense will host this year's Armed Forces Day crossband test. ARRL is soliciting school contacts for 2027. AMSAT announces all of the events it is planning for the Dayton Hamvention. Amateurs in Norway have new amateur radio regulations. An amateur is charged with interference to emergency services by the FCC. And an amateur in Florida is experimenting and exploring the use of the 4 and 8 meter bands. We will tell you all about his ongoing research in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onel Ben Shop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will attempt to answer the question, where is the spark gap? This is a fascinating look at the Grimeton SAQ alternator. Our own amateur radio historian, Bill Continelli, our previous historian, W2XOY, now a silent key, presents an encore presentation of one of his best of the ancient amateur archives, when he answers the question, what was Conelrad? We will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and more. And we will have a look at this month's edition of the Volunteer Monitor Report. That's all straight ahead, as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio here just outside of Albany, New York, where spring has finally sprung. We were in the mid-70s this past week. I'm George, W2XBS.
Reporting from our studio in beautiful Bradenton, Florida, I'm Mike Nicolich, K9DX Mike, encouraging you to participate in World Amateur Radio Day next weekend.
And reporting from our news bureau this week in my home shack in Cortlandville, New York, where the birds are chirping, the sun is shining, and the grass is growing. I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
Reporting from our news bureau here in Wisconsin, where rumor has it Dayton Hamvention is just around the corner, which means two things. Wallets are about to get lighter, and every I'm just going to look is a bold-faced lie. I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our Trey, New York News Bureau, where it's still raining, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet X-Ray.
Hello, everyone. Before we get into this week's newscast, I'd like to tell everyone that This Week in Amateur Radio now has its own Discord server. That's right. A place online where we can discuss everything technology and amateur radio. So join us. Just go to Discord on your computer or download the Discord app on your portable device and search for TWIAR or This Week in Amateur Radio. We look forward to seeing you on the new This Week in Amateur Radio Discord server. Today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio is 100% human.
Our lead story this week is about the upcoming World Amateur Radio Day. World Amateur Radio Day 2026 is just a week away, April 18th, when radio amateurs and their national societies worldwide celebrate the founding of the International Amateur Radio Union, or IARU. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all of the details.
It was on this day in 1925 that the IARU was formed in Paris, France. Hiram Percy Maxim, co-founder of ARRL, served as the first president. Since its founding, ARRL has served as the IARU International Secretariat. Like last year, ARRL is encouraging radio clubs to use World Amateur Radio Day or any time during the month of April to host a ham radio open house. Unlike ARRL Field Day, a ham radio open house is designed to showcase your club station and promote amateur radio science and technology to the public. Already 24 stations have added their events to the Ham Radio Open House Station Locator. You can find that at www.arrl.org/open-house. Ham Radio Open House highlights the amateur radio service as a platform for developing and practicing modern radio communication techniques and technology, and as a hands-on pathway into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM fields for the next generation. Visit www.arrl.org/World Amateur Radio Day for ideas and activities to engage your community or school radio club in World Amateur Radio Day and Ham Radio Open House. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Visit the League's Amateur Radio Day website page for ideas and activities to engage your community or school radio club in World Amateur Radio Day and Ham Radio Open House. Here are a few ways to participate in and promote World Amateur Radio Day. Operate a Get on the Air station. Set up in public places with permission, like libraries, science museums, and makerspaces. Include outdoor activities such as Parks on the Air activations, satellite operating, and fox hunts. Create and hold a special net or simply get on the air during World Amateur Radio Day from Saturday, April 18th, 2026 at midnight UTC to Sunday, April 19th, 2026 at midnight UTC. Get the word out. If you are an ARRL Public Information Coordinator, Public Information Officer, or responsible for club publicity, send a press release and conduct outreach to highlight the day and your events.
Joshua Long, W9HT, is the new ARRL Central Division Director. Brent Walls, N9BA, has resigned as ARRL Central Division Director, citing professional and personal commitments. He served as director since 2025, and before that as vice director beginning in 2021. Serving in the capacity of division director has been a truly rewarding experience and the highlight of my amateur radio journey, said Walls in a message to the ARRL members in the division. Whether supporting emergency communications, fostering technical growth, or strengthening our community connections, the ARRL plays an important part, and I'm proud to have been a part of it. Consistent with ARRL's governing documents, Joshua Long, W9HT, of New Haven, Indiana, who has served as vice director since 2025, has assumed the office of Central Division Director, effective immediately. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, will appoint a successor as vice director for the remaining term, which expires in 2027. The Central Division includes Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. ARRL is governed by an all-volunteer board of directors. Elections are held for 5 of the 15 ARRL divisions each year for terms of 3 years.
The Federal Communications Commission has sent a notice of unlicensed operation in the 11 GHz band to an internet service provider in the Sierra Nevada foothill region of California. Conifer Communications is an ISP based in Groveland. The FCC said it was transmitting on 10.915 GHz for over a year after its license had expired. That part of the radio spectrum is allocated by the Commission for common carrier and fixed point-to-point microwave operations. The San Francisco office of the FCC's Enforcement Bureau said that it received a complaint of an unlicensed station operating atop Moccasin Peak. Last September, according to the Commission's account, agents confirmed that Conifer Communications was transmitting with a license that expired in February 2024 and had not been renewed. The Enforcement Bureau warned that operating radio transmitting equipment without authorization is a violation of federal law and could subject Conifer to monetary fines and seizure of the equipment. Conifer Communications must discontinue operations immediately and must not resume. It also has 10 days from the date of the notice to respond with any evidence that it has authority to operate.
Amateur radio operators in Norway have a number of new regulations, including a new entry-level license. The Norwegian Communications Authority has approved an entry-level license for amateurs as one of the several changes taking effect. The entry-level or limited 10-watt license covers 80, 40, 20, 17, 15, 10, 6, and 2-meter bands, as well as the 70-centimeter band. Other changes include the removal of limitations to hams wishing to operate stations remotely, especially in Norway's overseas territories. The changes also affect the 23-centimeter band, which will now follow International Amateur Radio Union recommendations more directly. Again, remote control limitations have been lifted in Norway, specifically the limitation over remote operation in Norwegian territories, and the 23-centimeter band is now more closely adhering to CEPT recommendations.
Chris Stalkamp, Kilo India Zero Delta of Selby, South Dakota, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Dakota Division. ARRL President Rick Roderick, Kilo 5 Uniform Romeo, appointed Stalkamp, who has been South Dakota Section Manager since 2012. Stalkamp, an ARRL Life member, has been a radio amateur since 2006 and holds an extra class license. He's a member of the Black Hills Amateur Radio Club and Lake Area Radio Club in South Dakota, the Twin Cities DX Association, and the Minnesota Wireless Association. Interest in amateur radio runs in his family. His mother, Margaret, Kilo Alpha Zero, Bravo Echo Brava, and father, Lloyd, November Oscar, 7 Golf, of Havre, Montana, are both amateur radio operators. Stalkamp works as a sales agronomist for Agri Partners. The ARRL Dakota Division includes Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota.
This week, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr announced that the Commission would vote on an order to modernize its satellite spectrum sharing rules, a change that could unlock more than $2 billion in economic benefits for the American people and up to 7-fold more capacity for space-based broadband services. Drawing from the state-of-the-art satellite technology, the FCC's new technical rules would revise the decade-old framework for how geostationary orbit and non-geostationary orbit systems share spectrum. That 1990s-era framework predates the revolutionary changes in spectrum sharing technology that have developed in the decades since. The FCC's new framework will enable faster speeds, lower cost, and greater reliability, representing another step to ensure that consumers benefit from competitive and affordable internet options. The FCC is moving fast to unleash affordable, high-speed internet. By discarding last-century satellite regulations, we could see billions of dollars in benefits for the American economy and broadband speeds many times faster than what is available today. This overdue rethinking of space spectrum sharing rules will bring greater competition to the broadband marketplace and reduce the number of satellites needed to serve a given area. Our Build America agenda is unleashing America's space industry to deliver for consumers. The current decade-old regulatory regime has significantly limited the ability of operators to deliver high-speed, low-latency broadband services to consumers. Until now, non-geostationary orbit operators' power levels have been restricted by the limit developed in the late 1990s to protect geostationary orbit satellites. The public draft of the report and order will be available on the April Open Meetings webpage on the Commission's webpage.
With the Artemis II mission, with 4 astronauts now on their way back, a team of ARRS and AMSAT volunteers are watching from afar. Specifically, our experts will use a multinational network of ground station receivers to capture the Orion's capsule's one-way S-band communications with mission control as a secondary means of tracking the spacecraft. While NASA's Space Communications and Navigation, or SCAN program, will depend on the Near Space and Deep Space Network for primary tracking of the Orion during its 10-day mission around the Moon and back, it has also selected 34 individuals and groups, including an ARRS and AMSAT consortium across 14 countries, to provide an independent source of tracking data using the radio waves generated by normal communications. The concept works. For Artemis 1, an uncrewed launch into low Earth orbit in 2022, 10 individuals successfully tracked Orion throughout its mission. Based on lessons learned from that experience, SCAN now has data standards that Artemis 2 passive trackers use when sending the data to NASA. Another lesson SCAN learned from Artemis 1 was that there's a lot of interest in passive tracking. SCAN in August 2025 issued an official request for information to government agencies, companies, amateur radio organizations, and enthusiasts to participate in Artemis 2 tracking. According to NASA, those chosen through the RFI will use 47 ground assets in 14 countries to help the agency better assess the broader aerospace community's tracking capabilities and identify ways to augment future Moon and Mars mission support. ARRS and AMSAT are teamed up under the auspices of the ARRX, Amateur Radio Exploration Ground Station Consortium. ARRX is a joint ARRS and AMSAT international effort to develop and operate amateur radio systems for deep space, starting at the Moon and later to Mars. The team will provide one-way Doppler tracking of the S-band signals from space, recording the data and delivering it to SCAN in the proper format. The ARRX Worldwide Consortium includes teams in the United States at the University of Southern California and Dayton, Ohio, the UK at Goonhilly, Germany, and Poland. Other ARRX team members who supported the Artemis 1 initiative are also participating separately. ARRS Operations team member Daryl Young is serving as the project manager for the Artemis 2 tracking project.
An amateur radio operator is being called the source of radio interference that affected emergency service frequencies in one part of Pennsylvania last year, according to the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC's Enforcement Bureau has charged a ham radio operator in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, with interfering with UHF frequencies used by 911 emergency services. The FCC identified the ham as David Knutson, KD3ASC. According to the agency, the Pittsburgh amateur was transmitting on 470.4375 MHz from a handheld transceiver last July, prompting a complaint from the county's emergency services that there was interference on its dispatch channel. Using direction finding, the borough's enforcement agents tracked the signal to Knutson's home, where, they said, he showed them a Baofeng BTEC UV Pro HT, which he surrendered to them. The handheld radio is capable of transmitting on VHF and UHF amateur radio bands, as well as private land mobile radio bands. The FCC said the radio had been programmed to monitor the EMS channel, and that the audio relay was enabled, permitting traffic from one channel to be transmitted on another. The FCC notice is dated March 25th. Knutson must respond to the Enforcement Bureau within 10 days of that date.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, has welcomed a new high-performance Elecraft station to Studio 3 at W1AW, the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station, at its headquarters in Newington, Connecticut. Founded in 1998 and headquartered in Watsonville, California, Elecraft produces high-performance amateur radio equipment available both factory-assembled and as kits. Its product line spans ultra-portable to full-feature desktop stations and is widely used by operators ranging from parks-on-the-air activators to de-expedition teams. Elecraft co-founder Eric Swartz, WA6HHQ, visited ARRL headquarters April 7, 2026, to formally present the station. ARRL staff, including CEO David Minster, NA2AA, were on hand to receive the equipment. The station includes the K4D transceiver with built-in Cat4 automatic antenna tuner, KPA 1500 plus watt solid-state amplifier, and companion accessories including the K-Pod control panel, KPAC 3 aux cable interface, MH4 hand microphone, and SP4 speakers. The K4 supports full remote operation, allowing control from another K4, a software application, or Elecraft's K4/0 remote panel. Its peer-to-peer architecture enables straightforward remote setup without reliance on a centralized server. We're pleased to support ARRL and W1AW with this station, said Swartz. W1AW is an important destination for radio amateurs, and we are glad members and other visitors will have the opportunity to get on the air using Elecraft gear. Through partnerships with manufacturers, W1AW offers operators the opportunity to get on the air using a wide range of modern stations under one of the most recognized call signs in amateur radio. During his visit, Swartz also met with ARRL Senior Lab Engineer Rick Ciervo, W1CIE, and Digital RF Engineer John McAuliffe, W1DRF. Swartz is a key member of the ARRL Clean Signal Initiative Working Group, which is developing technical standards to improve transmitter and amplifier signal purity. The ARRL Clean Signal Initiative is a program of the ARRL Technical Standards Committee. We're grateful to Eric and to Ellicraft for their continued support of ARRL and the amateur radio service, said Minster.
The 2026 Dayton Hamvention will be held Friday through Sunday, May 15th through the 16th, 2026, at the Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia, Ohio. AMSAT will once again have a strong presence throughout the event, including booth activities, social gatherings, and the annual AMSAT Forum. The 17th annual TAPR and AMSAT Banquet will be held Friday, May 15th at 1830 EDT at the Kohler Presidential Banquet Center, 4548 Presidential Way, Kettering, Ohio 45429, located approximately 20 minutes from the Greene County Fairgrounds. This dinner is a highlight of the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio and AMSAT Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation activities during Hamvention. The banquet speaker will be announced at a later date. Tickets are $75 each and may be purchased through the AMSAT store. The deadline to purchase banquet tickets is Monday, May 11th at 2100 UTC. Tickets must be purchased in advance and will not be sold at the AMSAT booth or at the door. There will be no tickets available for pickup at the AMSAT booth either. Tickets purchased online will be maintained on a list with check-in at the door at the banquet center. Seating is limited to the number of meals reserved with the Kohler caterers based on ticket sales by the deadline. The annual AMSAT Dinner at Tickets gathering will take place Thursday, May 14th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. EDT at Tickets Pub and Eatery, 7 West Main Street, Fairborn, Ohio 45324. This informal event features no program or speaker, offering an opportunity for conversation and camaraderie. All are welcome, regardless of participation in booth setup or operations. Food may be ordered from the menu, and drinks, including beer, wine, sodas, and iced tea, are available at the bar. No reservations are required. AMSAT is seeking volunteers to assist at the AMSAT booth, located in Building 1, booths 1007 through 1010 and 1107 through 1110. Volunteers are encouraged to contribute as much time as they are able, whether for a few hours or the entire weekend. In 2025, approximately 20 volunteers supported AMSAT's activities and engagement with attendees. Those interested in volunteering or requesting additional information may contact Phil Smith, W1EME, AMSAT Hamvention Team Leader, via email at w1eme@astrocom.net. Volunteer participation plays an important role in supporting AMSAT's presence and outreach within the amateur radio community. The AMSAT Forum will be held Saturday, May 16th from 1:50 p.m. to 3:10 p.m. EDT in Forum Room 2. Additional details, including the banquet speaker announcement, will be provided as they become available.
It is the beginning of a new month, and that means it is time for the Volunteer Monitor Program Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the most recent activity report of the Volunteer Monitor Program. An operator in California was issued an advisory notice concerning a beacon on a 60-meter frequency not authorized to operators in the United States. Technician operators in Michigan and Oregon were issued advisory notices for 40-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians only have CW privileges. Technician operators in Illinois and Florida were issued advisory notices for 20-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. An advisory notice was issued to a resident in Bay Point, California, concerning unlicensed 2-meter transmissions from the property. An operator in Connecticut was issued a commendation for outstanding operation of the Hartford-Tolland County Skywarn net on the PVRA repeater system during a snowstorm. The net was operated continuously for 24 hours and relayed information on ground conditions to the National Weather Service. An operator in California was issued a commendation for exceptional courtesy and skill in assisting a POTA operator to change frequencies so that a net could begin operation on 20 meters. Results of the new automated FT4 and FT8 monitoring system are being reviewed. The program appears to be effective in continuously monitoring the frequencies to ensure that operators have the proper license class for the band they are using. There were 3 volunteer monitor program presentations to amateur radio clubs in Missouri and Maryland. Further evidence was provided to the FCC in 3 interference cases referred in January of this year. The totals for this month's monitoring were 1,437 hours on HF frequencies and 1,738 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,175 hours. We would like to thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
The Doomsday Radio is a Russian-based shortwave radio station that has been sending out a faint buzz and nothing else for 50 years. But last week, the Doomsday Radio started sending out one key word again and again. That word, dezigator, which in Russian translates to decontaminator or degasser. The question is why? We have developed new technology that places security and our privacy as the top priority, but this tech message has baffled the most enthusiastic radio operators. Many experts and scientists have believed for years that the Doomsday Radio was a failsafe for nuclear war. In March of this year, the station suddenly wakes up from its slumber and sends 16 voice messages out in a single day. This is usually associated with rising geopolitical tensions around the world. Some fear that this could be a prerequisite for new military actions, with the station also mentioning NATO countries like Latvia. But despite all this, the most likely explanation is that these are merely military orders or tests.
The Federal Communications Commission has upheld a $60,000 fine against a South Florida man for allegedly operating a pirate radio station. The FCC says Aaron Streeter allegedly operated an unauthorized radio station on 89.1 FM known as DePound FM in Miami Gardens, Florida. Last year it proposed the fine for the violation, and after never receiving a response, the Commission has formalized the penalty. It was 2 years ago that agents from the FCC's Miami field office monitored and traced the unauthorized signal to a single-family residence with a broadcast antenna in the rear of their property. The agents talked to Streeter's wife, who had her husband call agents later that afternoon. He allegedly told them during the phone call that he operated the station and agreed to cease broadcasting. However, on January 8th, the FCC says agents returned to the area and once again heard DePound FM on the air. In its annual report to Congress on pirate radio, the FCC also said it issued 28 notices to property owners and managers last year, including 17 connected directly to pirate radio sweeps. But that was down from 41 notices issued to property owners and managers during fiscal 2024.
The Yavapai Amateur Radio Club in Prescott, Arizona, has found a new way to help make amateur radio attractive to, well, just about everyone. With more details on this week's club, we go to league headquarters, where John Ross, KD8 IDJ, has this report.
Club Public Information Officer Fernando Menegosha, KJ7QHI, said it all started with an idea from club member and ARRL life member Jim Zimmerman, N6KZ. Jim knew about a display area in the Prescott Public Library that had been used by the Red Cross and for model train displays, so he figured why not ask if he could bring in amateur radio equipment and put it on display, bringing new meaning to the phrase location, location, location. Well, the library was contacted, the paperwork completed. Zimmerman chose a location that was near the public use computer area where many young patrons spend a lot of their time. With the help of club president Brian Wilkinson, KD7JI, and Menegosha, they moved Zimmerman's collection of vintage ham radio equipment to the display area. Nicolich is an experienced photographer. He took pictures and made charts and other display information. There are many patrons, young and old, who took the time to view the displays at Nicolich. According to many, there were also many wow moments. The display is open until the end of April to help tell the story of amateur radio and how it can help the entire community. The Yavapai Amateur Radio Club is the largest club in Arizona with 300 members and is an ARRL Special Service Club. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
The Yavapai Amateur Radio Club's mission statement reads, increasing our members' knowledge, mastery, and enjoyment of amateur radio communication while serving the Yavapai community by assisting in emergency and public service events. The club plans to host its annual Hamfest on May 30th, 2026 at a local high school.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJAB. Let's start with some information about a couple of upcoming DXpeditions. First, here's press release number 2 dated April 3rd, 2026 for the Tokelau Islands DXpedition. In January of 2026, we announced that members of the Perseverance DX Group and the Western Washington DX Club intended to activate Tokelau, Zulu Kilo 3. Planning for this project continues. On April 3rd, 2026, we had a meeting in Auckland, New Zealand with our Tokelauan sponsor. Additional project details were discussed at that time. We'll be on the atoll for the last 2 weeks of November 2026. The exact dates will be announced after the Tokelau Transport Office finalizes their November boat schedule. The operating location has been selected and accommodations for the team were discussed. Also discussed were the details of a humanitarian project we're planning for that local school. There are formal government meetings planned for November. We elected to be there after these meetings conclude. The meetings are part of an ongoing recognition of 100 years of the Tokelau-New Zealand relationship. While the team is funding the project without a major fundraising campaign, we appreciate donations to offset the equipment, shipping expenses, and the humanitarian project. All details will be announced as they develop. The website is tok-dx.com, and any questions you have can be directed to info@pdxg.net. And that was from the Tokelau 2026 team. And I wish them luck. I know a couple of the people go on, and they are terrific. That will be a very successful DXpedition. Well, another one coming up is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The call sign will be 9 Tango 0 Mike Delta, the first time the prefix 9 Tango 0 has ever been used. The Mediterranean DX Club is pleased to announce the organization of a major amateur radio expedition to the Democratic Republic of the Congo from September 30th to October 11th of 26. This expedition will involve 14 international operators and will aim to activate amateur radio in one of the most sought-after countries in the world for amateur radio DXers. Great importance will be given to traditional operating modes, or the human modes as they're called, CW and sideband. This choice will allow radio amateurs from around the world to contact the expedition even without the use of automatic digital modes, keeping alive the spirit of radio and manual operation. The expeditions are one of the most complex and expensive projects in the amateur radio world, but they allow thousands of radio amateurs around the world to connect rare countries and keep their passion for radio alive. Any contribution, large or small, will be extremely important to the success of this DXpedition. Well, there's 2 that are coming up, and let me give you some update on one that just finished. This is an update on the Sierra 21 Whiskey Delta DXpedition to Bangladesh. The Sierra 21 Whiskey Delta DXpedition has successfully concluded operations from IOTA AS-140, with the team safely returning to Dhaka after completing its primary objective. During the 12-day activity period, the team reached a total of over 73,000 QSOs, exceeding their initial target of 70,000 contacts. This marks a strong operational result under challenging environmental and technical conditions. The team had the privilege to operate from Char Kukri Mukri, located in the very south of Bangladesh. Reaching this remote location required extensive logistics, including approximately 18 hours of travel one way within the country, using a combination of speedboat, tuk-tuk, cargo tricycle, ferry, and moped. A special thanks goes to Epon, Sierra 21 Alpha Bravo Oscar, and Anup, Sierra 21 Tango Victor, for their outstanding involvement and commitment throughout the project. Their local support was essential for both preparation and execution. Following the return to Dhaka, the team is currently regrouping at the hotel. Additional updates regarding the QTH setup and further impressions from the island will follow shortly, including selected photos from the operation. The team will now begin processing log requests. Once completed, the full log will be uploaded free of charge to LOTW and OQRS via Club Log, and it will be open for all QSL card inquiries as outlined on the expedition website that you can check. Further updates and a final summary will follow. I thought they did a tremendous job, and from where I am at in southwestern Ohio, that's an extremely difficult place to hit, and we did get them in the log. So congratulations on a job well done. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So first, we have an update on 3 Baker 9 Rodriguez Island. Victor Uniform 3 Oscar Papa Tango, also known as Oscar Mike 0 Golf Alpha, Savarna, is QRV as 3 Baker 9 November from Port Mathurin, Rodriguez until May 20th. So he'll be there a number of 5 weeks. From French Polynesia, we have this. On Monday, Fox Oscar Stroke, Fox 6 Bravo Charlie Whiskey, Didier, reported that the island's internet network had been down for approximately 1.5 hours and may remain unavailable until Tuesday. Severe weather, including heavy squalls and violent thunderstorms with lightning, caused significant damage to temporary antenna setups. The 30-meter and 40-meter bands are currently unusable, and the vertical dipole arrays, VDAs, nearly collapsed. The main station itself remains operational, however. Monitoring of beacons shows 0 European signals and no European opening was expected on Monday. So just keep an ear out for French Polynesia. And then we have Whiskey 4, which is Timor-Leste. On April 1st, Victor Kilo 4 Mike Alpha Papa, Darren, arrived in Timor-Leste, and on April 5th was on the air with the 4 Whiskey 6 Delta Alpha call sign, holiday style. He should now be QRV from Aturo Island in the East Timor Coastal Islands group. He will have call signs 4 Whiskey 6 Delta Oscar stroke Papa at that time. Darren says he will mostly be on 10 meters, but also on 80, 40, 20, 15, and 12 as voice only. He has an ICOM IC7300, 2 wire antennas to choose from, and 100 watts. And you can QSL the Timor-Leste operation via VK4 MAP. From the Comoros Islands, which is Delta 6, we have this. After completing his Fox Hotel stroke United Radio 9 India Delta X-ray operation from Mayat, Ivan will continue his journey to the Indian Ocean with a month-long stop in the Comoros as Delta 60DX. Listen for him on CW and sideband. So here's an update on Western Sahara. Nama, Sierra 01 Alpha, and Osman, Sierra 01 Alpha Hotel, will be QRV on as Sierra 09 Sierra until May 31st, operating from Sahrawi Republic to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Sahrawi Republic. They are running 100 watts to dipole antennas and multiband beams. They will be operating QO100 from several grids. Look for Sierra 09 Sierra to also be QRV during the CQWPX CW contest May 30 and 31. QSL via Club Log and LOTW. A little bit in the future, we will see 3 X-ray Fox Sugar Golf. That's correct, just one number, 3 X-ray Fox Sugar Golf, the Republic of Guinea, to be activated by Elvira, Italy Victor 3 Fox Sugar Golf, from April 11th to the 25th, so just about the time you're getting this. She will operate HF and 6 meters, all modes, with 2 low power stations and vertical antennas. Elvira expects a couple of daily power outages that will force her off the air for amounts of time undetermined. She is a terrific operator, and it's just great to listen to. She really knows how to handle a pileup. From the Congo, which is Tango November, we have this. Father Dark, Hotel Fox 3 Golf Delta, is now in Brazzaville on a new pastoral and humanitarian mission. In West Africa, he also has the call sign Tango Juliet 1 Golf Delta, Tango Lima 8 Golf Delta, and Tango Tango 1 Golf Delta. In the Congo, he will be known as Tango November 8 Golf Delta on HF and 6 FT modes as well as CW and sideband. He's still waiting for his logbook of the world certificate. He's hoping to set up a remote operation when the infrastructure there can support it. From Guyana, we have this, 8 Radio. 8 Radio on Tango Mike is QRV until May 10th. Weekdays between 2300 Zulu and 0300 Zulu on 160 through 6 meters, CW, sideband, digital, and satellite. Papa Yankee 1, Sugar Alpha Delta, Aldir says on the weekends it's full-time on 160 through 6, the same modes. From Greenland, we have this, Greenland being Oscar X-Ray. Oscar Zulu 1, Delta Juliet Juliet, Bo is QRV is Oscar X-Ray 3, Lima X-Ray, again from Aziat Island, which is North America-134 in the IOTA chase, Greenland until April 25th. He's there on a work assignment and will be QRV in his spare time. From Cocos Keeling Island, which is VK9-C, we have this. VK9 BSA, Mark, and VK9 DEE, Dina, are QRV from Cocos Keeling. Band conditions are currently not favorable, and Mark will mainly be operating on weekends and some evenings. There is no fixed operating schedule yet. And finally, from the Marquesa Islands, which is Fox Oscar M, we have this. The TX9W team headed to the Marquesa Islands report that they will depart in 11 days. They plan to be active from Haiva O, Marquesa Islands on April 19th. And that's always a good one to get in the log. Well, this week, the DX Mentor YouTube episode will feature Charlie Echo 3 stroke N5NU and K0MD discussing POTA and DXing from Chile. Give it a watch and let me know what you think. We really had a blast recording it, and he's really a great guy. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ being saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
Picture the following scenario in a slightly grainy black and white for added effect. It's the 1950s. A ham is sitting at his station, having a CW QSO. He's wearing a suit and tie. Before him is a Hammerlin receiver, a Johnson Viking transmitter, and a homebrew modulator. On the wall are QSL cards and his honorable discharge certificate. On the table is a collection of QST magazines, along with some curious pamphlets with titles such as Protect Them, Join Civil Defense, America Calling, Take Your Place in Civil Defense, It Can Happen Here, Know the Signals, and even a comic book featuring a character called Bert the Turtle. While the Vibroplex clicks away, another radio sits in the background, quietly spitting out atmospheric noise. It's an AM broadcast receiver, one of those 5-tube AC/DC models produced by the millions. This unit, an Marvin in an Art Deco plastic cabinet, is tuned to one of 2 triangular markings on the dial. Suddenly the silence is shattered by a piercing 1,000 cycle tone. The ham looks up, rips off his headphones, and listens to a message. He jumps from the chair, runs to the door, and yells to his wife, "Grab the kids and go down to the fallout shelter. The Conelrad alarm just went off." Conelrad, which stood for Control of Electromagnetic Radiations, had its embryonic start in December 1951 when President Harry Truman signed an executive order directing the FCC to set up a security system for all civilian radio services. Throughout 1952, Conelrad was developed and tested, and by early 1953 it was ready. The purpose of Conelrad was to relay civil defense information to the public without allowing enemy aircraft to use our radio signals as a beacon for their direction-finding equipment. In the event of an emergency, all FM, TV, and most AM stations would proceed with the following alarm sequence. First, current programming would be discontinued. Then, 5 seconds, the carrier was off the air, followed by 5 seconds, an unmodulated carrier. Then, 5 seconds, carrier off the air, followed by 15 seconds of a 1,000 cycle modulated carrier, then a 1-minute maximum initial Conelrad message, and finally the carrier off the air for the duration of the alert. The remaining AM stations would shift to either 640 or 1240 kilocycles and simultaneously broadcast a more detailed emergency message. The stations would constantly turn their carriers on and off. For example, Station A, operating on 640 kilocycles, would broadcast the emergency message for 15 seconds and suddenly cut its carrier. The public would then hear Station B, also on 640 kilocycles, with the same message. When Station B went silent, Station C would appear and, after a few seconds, Station A would be back on the air. This cluster pattern would continue until the emergency message had been broadcast. The same activity would be happening on 1240 kilocycles. No call signs or other ID would be given. In this way, the FCC and the Office of Civil Defense hope to confuse enemy aircraft trying to use AM radio stations as a homing beacon. The ARRL and the FCC realized that amateur stations might also serve as a beacon. Therefore, from the beginning, amateurs were urged to keep watch on 640 or 1240 kilocycles and to kill their transmitters when the alarm was given. With the importance of Conelrad in the early 1950s, it's surprising that amateurs were not required to monitor for the Conelrad alarm. This was rectified on January 2, 1957, when the FCC amended Part 12 of the Rules and Regulations to require the following. All operators of stations in the amateur radio service will be responsible for the reception of the Conelrad radio alert by monitoring 640 or 1240 kilocycles. During a Conelrad radio alert, all operators of amateur radio stations will cease communications immediately. Stations operating under the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, RACES, and other stations specifically authorized would be allowed to remain on the air under the following conditions. No transmission would be made unless it is of extreme emergency affecting the national safety or the safety of life and property. Transmissions would be as short as possible. No station identification or location would be given. Tactical calls would be utilized if necessary. And the radio station carrier would be discontinued during periods of no message transmission. Amateur stations were not allowed back on the air until the Conelrad radio all-clear message was transmitted. With the requirement of continuous broadcast band monitoring, homebrew projects, kits, and commercial products began to appear to help the amateur keep in compliance with Part 12-190. While some amateurs simply used a simple AM radio, others bought or built specific Conelrad receivers. Heathkit had the CA-1 Conelrad alarm. Morrow Radio had the CM1 Conelrad monitor, and the Walter Ash Radio Company had the model CA Conalarm. Radio Shack's first transistor radio, which sold for a mere $29.95 and $1958, was advertised as perfect for monitoring Conelrad. When Class D CB radio was authorized in September of 1958, the rules specified that CBers also had to monitor Conelrad. In the event of an emergency, all citizen band operators had to leave the air. There were no RACES provisions for them. By the early 1960s, the possibility of long-range enemy bombers homing in on our radio signals was becoming remote. Instead, intercontinental ballistic missiles were the new threat. They didn't require our broadcast signals as beacons. Conelrad was becoming obsolete. Thus, in the autumn of 1962, Conelrad was replaced by the emergency broadcast system. Ironically, Conelrad disappeared right around the time it might have been needed the most, the Cuban Missile Crisis. As the 1960s wore on, the Cold War gradually disappeared and the specter of imminent enemy attack disappeared. Today, only the faded fallout shelter signs and those triangular markings on old AM radios remain to remind us of Conelrad and the Cold War. As I write this, I can hear a Springfield, Massachusetts station on 640 kilohertz, while a heterodyne of Class 4 stations commingles on 1240. And yet, what is that I hear faintly in the background? A 1000 cycle tone? This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The Department of Defense will host this year's Armed Forces Day Crossband Test, scheduled for May 9th, 2026. This annual event is open to all licensed amateur radio operators and will not impact any public or private communications. For more than 50 years, military and amateur stations have taken part in this event, which is an interoperability exercise between hobbyist and government radio stations. The AFD Crossband Test is a unique opportunity to test two-way communications between military communicators and radio stations in the amateur radio service, as authorized in 47 CFR 97.111. These tests provide opportunities and challenges for radio operators to demonstrate individual technical skills in a tightly controlled exercise scenario. Military stations will transmit on selected military frequencies and will announce the specific amateur radio service frequencies monitored. All times are Zulu, and all frequencies are upper sideband unless otherwise noted. An AFD message will be transmitted utilizing the military standard serial PSK waveform followed by mil standard wide shift FSK, 850 Hz RTTY, as described in mil standard 188-110A/B.
The amateur radio on the International Space Station, or ARRL program, is seeking formal and informal education institutions and organizations, individually or working together, to host their amateur radio contact with a crew member on board the ISS. ARRL anticipates that the contact would be held between January 1st, 2027 to June 30th, 2027. Crew scheduling and ISS orbits will determine the exact contact dates. To maximize these radio contact opportunities, ARRL is looking for organizations that will draw large numbers of participants and integrate the contact into a well-developed education plan. This proposal is due to ARRL by May 22nd, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Time. Proposal information and more details such as expectations, proposal guidelines, and the proposal form can be found on ARRL.org. An informational webinar will be held at 8 p.m. Eastern on April 30th on Zoom. Crew members aboard the International Space Station will participate in scheduled amateur radio contacts. These radio contacts are approximately 10 minutes in length and allow students to interact with the astronauts through a question and answer session. An ARRL contact is a voice-only communication opportunity via amateur radio between astronauts and cosmonauts aboard the space station and classrooms and communities. ARRL contacts afford education audiences the opportunity to learn firsthand from astronauts what it is like to live and work in space and to learn about space research conducted on the ISS. Students will also have an opportunity to learn about satellite communication, wireless technology, and radio science. Because of the nature of human spaceflight and the complexity of scheduling activities aboard the ISS, organizations must demonstrate flexibility to accommodate changes in dates and times of the radio contact. Please direct any questions to education@arriss-usa.org.
Get ready for amateur radio's biggest annual gathering. Dayton Hamvention 2026 will take place May 15th through the 17th at the Greene County Fair and Expo Center in Xenia, Ohio. John Ross, Kilo Delta 8, India Delta Juliet is here with everything you need to know.
General Chairman Brian Marklin, N8UDQ, said volunteers are working hard to make this the best show yet. This year's theme is Radio Adventure. Radio Adventure has always been about exploration of ideas, technologies, distances, and possibilities, from the earliest spark gap pioneers to today's digital experiments, satellite operators, contesters, emergency communicators, and outdoor enthusiasts. Amateur radio continues to be a gateway to discovery, said Marklin. Among the activities taking place is the ARRL Youth Rally, returning on Saturday, May 16th. That rally is designed for students ages 11 to 21 and offers a great opportunity to connect with other young hams. Youth Rally activities will be led by ARRL Director of Education and Learning Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, and volunteers from the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program. Advanced registration is recommended, while Hamvention admission is already free for students, high school and younger. The $20 Youth Rally registration fee includes a T-shirt to be worn on Saturday, badge and lanyard, reusable tote bag, and a complimentary 3-day Hamvention admission ticket for Friday through Sunday. Students will enjoy an afternoon of hands-on activities, learning, and fun. Highlights will include satellite communications, a short sprint contest, a fox hunt, and a chance to make contact with a parachute mobile station. Attendees are encouraged to bring a 2-meter handheld radio if you have one. The youth rally will be followed by the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Meetup. I'm John Ross, KD8I DJ.
For more information about the youth rally and registration, and to find other ARRL activities and exhibits at Hamvention, visit www.ARRL.org/Dayton-Hamvention-2026. For Hamvention information and general admission tickets, visit hamvention.org.
The Federal Communications Commission said this week that it will vote this month on a proposal to bar all Chinese labs from testing electronic devices such as smartphones, cameras, and computers for use in the U.S., widening a previous action targeting Beijing. The FCC last year banned testing of U.S. electronics by labs owned or controlled by the Chinese government, which led to 23 labs being barred. But the substantial majority of Chinese-based test labs are still testing U.S. electronics, the agency said. The FCC says about 75% of all electronics are tested in labs in China. The FCC will vote on the proposal April 30th before considering public comments and finalizing the prohibition. Before the FCC takes a final vote to ban all Chinese testing, it will separately vote to adopt a streamlined approval process for devices tested in U.S. labs or labs from countries not posing national security risks, the agency said. The Chinese embassy in Washington did not immediately comment. This is the latest move by Washington to crack down on China over technology issues and equipment. In 2021, the FCC added telecommunications and video surveillance equipment made by Huawei, ZTE, Dahua, and Haight to its covered list of companies posing U.S. national security risks.
Field Day is approaching fast, and so is the 4th of July. Stock up on official 2026 ARRL Field Day merchandise and own a piece of history with this year's patriotic red, white, and blue design honoring America's 250th anniversary. ARRL Field Day is June 27th and 28th, and it's amateur radio's largest on-the-air event and part of a nationwide America 250 celebration. This year's theme, Amateur Radio, a national resource, highlights the vital role ham radio plays in public service, emergency communications, and connecting communities. Whether you plan to operate as a group, with a friend, or simply visit a local site, there's no better time to get ready. The 2026 Field Day collection is now shipping and includes t-shirts, hats, mugs, pins, patches, stickers, notebooks, banners, recruitment posters, and more. The t-shirt lists ARRL and RAC sections on the back, a fun way to track contacts. Comfortable, durable, and unisex, it's ideal for both Field Day and 4th of July celebrations. Be among the first to shop the collection at www.arrl.org/shop and celebrate Field Day in style. For rules and full resources and the latest information, visit arrl.org/fieldday.
It is time for AMSAT's satellite shorts from all over, and we only have one really short story for you. The 2-hour launch window of the Artemis II mission provided a practical example of the effects of space debris and satellite crowding. During the launch window, NASA was required to respect approximately 156 what it calls cuts. A cut is a period when the rocket could not be launched due to the risk of collision with a satellite or trackable debris in low Earth orbit. Each cut can last from 1 to 23 seconds. The NASA TV commentator noted that it wasn't many years earlier when the number of cuts for this type of mission was only in the 40s.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The thing I love most about this amazing hobby of amateur radio is the sheer size of the community and the depth of knowledge that comes with it. Case in point, the other day I mentioned the Spark Gap transmitter at Grimeton in Sweden. A few hours after releasing my comments into the void, I received a message from Paul, Sierra Alpha 7 Charlie November Delta, who lives, wait for it, 153 kilometres from the transmitter. He's been on site while it was running, transmitting on 17.2 kHz. Paul pointed out that the Grimeton transmitter is not a spark gap transmitter at all. It's actually an Alexanderson alternator, an entirely different beast, and all the more interesting for it. Invented by Swedish electrical engineer and inventor Ernst Fredrik Werner Alexanderson, he received a patent for it in 1911, whilst working for General Electric. He died in 1975, aged 97, with 345 patents to his name. Before I dig in, because you know I will, the transmitter at Grimeton was officially opened on the 1st of December in 1924. Built to increase Swedish independence after World War I revealed its vulnerability to foreign-controlled transatlantic telegraph cables. Serving as a telegraphy station capable of transmitting traffic across the Atlantic Ocean, the station was in regular service until 1996. Unlike its scrapped brethren, the Grimeton transmitter is currently operated several times a year as a functioning transmitter using the call sign Sierra Alpha Quebec. Announcements are made on the station mailing list and the website at grimeton.org, but generally on Alexanderson Day in July and Christmas Eve in December. You'll need to tune to 17.2 kHz, something you can do with a sound card or with an SDR. Sound card, you say? Yes. Not for audio, but for RF. Connect an antenna to the microphone center pin input and have at it. Note that this will likely be highly susceptible to noise, so filtering and experimentation are to be expected. There's several tools around to play with this. GNU Radio, Quisk, Super SID, and SAQRX. Also, there's plenty of other VLF or very low frequency stations to listen to. I should probably add this as a 51st thing to do with SDR, but I digress. Back to Grimeton. As the last remaining functional Alexanderson alternator transmitter, it was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2004. You can visit and see firsthand what radio history looks like. As I said, if you pick your day, you can even watch it working. Failing that, there's plenty of YouTube videos showing the entire process. It's an absolute monster. There's even an amateur Radio Shack on site with the call sign Sierra Kilo 6 Sierra Alpha Quebec. The website says that it's open sporadically, so I'd recommend you contact them before heading to Grimeton. I'll note that at the time that this station was being commissioned, in 1924, it was already being superseded by valve oscillators, which brings me to how it works. Depending on where you live, you're likely familiar with the 50 or 60 Hz alternating current associated with household electricity. In 1891, Irish experimental physicist Frederick Thomas Troughton pointed out that if you could run an alternator at high enough speed, it would create an alternating current at radio frequencies. Said differently, creating a continuous wave at radio frequencies. Much experimentation followed, and many giant shoulders supported this effort. It goes a little like this. Use an electric motor designed to spin at 900 revolutions per minute, connect it to a gearbox, connect that to a rotor with multiple poles, then run the motor with a clutch to vary the speed. If that's not enough to produce high power, the clearances between rotor and stator have to be kept to 1 millimeter. Then there is cooling and lubrication to consider, not to mention dealing with thermal expansion and contraction of a fast-spinning and closely toleranced disc. At Grimeton, the whole transmitter weighs in at 50 tons, pretty much the opposite of portable operation. The rotor at Grimeton is a 1.6 metre diameter disc with a 7.5 centimetre thick edge, with 488 slots milled into it, each filled with brass. The motor at Grimeton runs at just over 711.3 revolutions per minute. The gearbox has a ratio of 2.973, and the whole contraption generates 17,200 hertz. If you get the sense that you're balancing an elephant on top of a needle, you're almost there, but if you consider that keying the transmitter changes the load and currents, it's more like an elephant being shoved by a train balancing on top of a needle. At Grimeton, the motor is loaded by one of 3 liquid resistors, which each consist of a 2-metre-high container filled with water and baking soda. The liquid level is controlled by separate pumps, varying the resistance. Whilst transmitting, a second liquid resistor is added, reducing the resistance to regulate the speed of the motor to maintain the overall speed and the associated frequency. The resistors generate heat, which is fed through a heat exchange to the station's water cooling system. The third resistor is available as a spare. The remarkable thing? It works. So much so that there were several stations built and operated across the planet. There's more. This system is also capable of amplitude modulation, and with it the ability to send the human voice across the airwaves. As an aside, there's a rotating spark gap transmitter by Canadian electrical engineer and inventor Reginald Fessenden, who is said to have given voice to radio in 1900 across a 1.6 kilometre distance. But that's a tale for another day. The frequency that Grimeton transmits on, 17.2 kHz, means a wavelength of nearly 17.5 kilometres. The antenna at Grimeton is only about 2 kilometres long. In other words, it's a compromise antenna. I'm making a joke here, but also a point. Every antenna is a compromise. Any antenna is better than no antenna. Meanwhile, the antenna at Grimeton looks like a string of high-voltage pylons with 8 wires strung between them. Each of the 6 towers is 127 metres tall, with a crossarm that's 46 metres wide. Every tower holds a vertical radiator connected to the ground via a coil to tune the phase and capacitance of each radiator. So, spark gap this is not. Well, at least not intentionally. This remarkable piece of engineering makes me wonder if you can use the same system to spin a modern motor, say the spindle of a CNC, and use it to get on air and make noise. Now all I need is someone to talk to. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. AMSAT will have their 44th annual Space Symposium and annual meeting this year in Jacksonville, Florida, at the Crown Plaza JAX Airport. October 8th and the morning of October 9th is the Board of Directors meeting. The afternoon of October 9th and all day October 10th will be the symposium and annual membership meeting. There will be a banquet on the evening of October 10th and a membership breakfast the morning of October 11th. Rooms for the event will be $109 per night. Links for registration and room registration will be available shortly on amsat.org. The Students on the Air every first and third Tuesday of the month is doing quite well. This is to encourage students to operate through amateur satellites with others around the world. Iowa State University was active this week from their club station. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at the solar weather forecast and the terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar activity remained at low levels, with the largest flare of the past week being a C8.9 on April 8th from region 4414, which was accompanied by a Type 3 radio burst. Most of the C-class activity came from either this region or region 4409, which has developed a delta spot in its intermediary area. All remaining spots were either stable or in slight decay, with region 4406 rotating over the west limb by the end of the reporting period. Coronal activity was observed in CCOR-1, LASCO, and stereo available imagery during the period. Of the 4 eruptions, 1 was far-sighted, 1 was too narrow, plus too far north of the ecliptic to have any Earth-directed component, and 2 had the potential for Earth-directed components. These eruptions were seen off the eastern limb in LASCO C2 starting on April 7th and April 8th. The first was associated with a C2.4 flare from region 4414, while there was no clear source for the second. Modeling indicates these eruptions will pass behind Earth's orbit and no impact is anticipated. Eruptions potentially associated with the C8.9 are currently being analyzed. Solar activity is expected to be at low levels over April 9th through the 11th, with a chance for M-class minor to moderate flares and a slight chance for X-class strong flares, driven primarily by the flare potential of regions 4409 and 4414. Looking at solar wind, the solar wind parameters reflected the transition out of a waning negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream into nominal conditions. Wind speeds continued to decline from a peak of 500 kilometers per second to near 400 kilometers per second by the end of the period. Solar wind parameters are anticipated to return to normal conditions on April 9th before becoming disturbed on April 10th due to the anticipated arrival of a co-rotating interaction region ahead of a positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Carl Luetzelswab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, you can also visit the VOA CAP Online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in Radio Sport this week, April 11th, the QRP ARCI Spring QSO Party. That's CW. April 11th through the 12th, the JIDX CW Contest. That's CW. And April 11th through the 12th, the DIG QSO Party. That is CW as well. And remember to visit the ARRL Contest calendar for more events and information in your area. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions, April 10th through the 11th, it's the Greene County Hamfest hosting the ARRL Oklahoma Section Convention. That's in Claremore, Oklahoma. April 18th, the Delmarva Amateur Radio and Electronics Expo hosting the ARRL Delaware State Convention. That's in Georgetown, Delaware. And on May 3rd, the Warminster Amateur Radio Club Annual Hamfest hosting the ARRL Eastern Pennsylvania Section Convention. That's in Bristol, Pennsylvania. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
The National Voice of America Museum of Broadcasting is welcoming Hamvention guests by offering extended hours from Thursday, May 14th through Sunday, May 17th. The museum and the Westchester Amateur Radio Association, which is headquartered there, will be sharing a wide variety of exhibits that include a disc jockey setup from a vintage radio station, vintage ham and shortwave equipment, and the Voice of America's first transmitter, dating from 1942. The club's ham radio station, Whiskey Charlie 8, Victor Oscar Alpha, will be sharing access to its shack, so come with your license and be prepared to get on the air. Admission is $10 at the door. For each day's extended hours, and for directions on how to find the museum from Xenia, visit the website voamuseum.org or Whiskey Charlie 8, Victor Oscar Alpha.org. The independent nonprofit museum in Westchester, Ohio, is not affiliated with the U.S. government's Voice of America service.
Rita Bauer-Wright, KC9 CDL, taught math and science for 38 years at District 111 in Burbank, Illinois, USA, where she always encouraged her students to reach for the stars. Rita wrote educational materials for NASA, so in 1988, she challenged her students to come up with a name for the next space shuttle. Her students' projects also included solar-powered cars, robot prototypes for Mars exploration. But it was on December 21, 2000, that Rita led 14 elementary school students to make the first school contact by ham radio with the International Space Station. It took years to coordinate through the ARRL application and ARRL education proposal process. Leading up to that set date, the suburban Chicago school was covered with space-themed projects made by the kids in all classrooms from kindergarten to 8th grade. The first attempt was set for December 19th, with Charles Sufana, AJ9N, assisting with the contact with Commander William Shepard, KD-5 GSL, aboard the ISS. That didn't go as planned. A successful retry came 2 days later. Rita wrote in her post-contact report that at 2028 UTC, Bill Shepard and the ISS came up over the horizon for what turned out to be a near-direct overhead pass. Charlie and his team made a connection within seconds and continued up to 2039 UTC. All 14 students chosen to ask questions got their chance. Chicago area students were greeted by their teachers in the morning and by the afternoon are welcomed aboard the ISS. Rita is survived by her loving OM of 68 years, Billy KC9 HRM, and a member of the Chicago Area Stars Radio Club. Thanks to the President Dennis Calderon, KC9 DSP, for helping Rita keep her license active in recent years and for sharing her legacy. Rita Wright became a silent key on March 8, 2026. Meanwhile, Carlos Almanon, LU7 DSY, enjoyed a long and busy career on both the professional and amateur side of radio. Over the years, he became well-known as a TV and radio journalist for a number of media outlets in Argentina. A former sports journalist, he later moved on to covering news and had served as a war correspondent on the Falklands. Across oceans and continents, the radio amateur became known as a successful DXer and a DXpeditioner. He was a member of the DXCC Honor Roll. Locally, Carlos' talents were put to good use during the annual American Lighthouse Weekend, organized each February by members of the Radio Club Grupo DX Bahia Blanca, which he founded. Carlos became a silent key on the 21st of March. He was 79.
As the nation prepares to celebrate National Train Day on Saturday, May 9th, 2026, the Fort Myers Amateur Radio Club is gearing up for a high-tech and high-heritage celebration at the Railroad Museum of South Florida. To mark the occasion, the club will be on site and on the air, transmitting in Morse code, in homage to the historic role of telegraphy in railway operations. Operations will be from 10 a.m. through 3:30 p.m. Eastern, and everyone will have an opportunity to explore the rich history of the museum while witnessing Morse code transmissions reminiscent of the telegraph's heyday. Licensed operators will also demonstrate modern voice and digital communications options. The event also serves as a tribute to the innovators who made rail travel safe and efficient and commemorates the driving of the Golden Spike at Promontory Summit, Utah on May 10, 1869, which marked the completion of the first transcontinental railroad in the U.S. The Fort Myers Amateur Radio Club is an ARRL-affiliated club.
Expecting that orbital laboratories, inhabitable spacecraft, in-space repairs, and many other related uses are going to have a need for greater access to the RF spectrum, the Federal Communications Commission is seeking comment on ways to make that happen. The agency voted last month to address new ways to support tracking, telemetry, and command for a variety of on-the-horizon initiatives. The FCC published the proceeding on its website, referring to the uses as weird space stuff. The agency said that the proposed rulemaking is part of a larger effort to modernize policies in support of the quickly growing space sector. It encouraged comments in particular from companies involved in different aspects of lunar missions, satellite servicing, or related operations. One of the potential frequency ranges referenced in the notice of proposed rulemaking is frequency range 2305 MHz to 2315 MHz, which overlaps part of the amateur radio allocation on 13 centimeters. The proposal is docket number 26-54.
A mobile phone network created to provide public safety agencies around the United States with reliable emergency communications is poised for service upgrades after reaching an agreement with the federal government and the network's private sector partner, AT&T. Under the deal, AT&T, which built and maintains the network known as FirstNet, will cover the cost of $1 billion worth of the network's improvements. At the same time, AT&T will reduce its bill to the federal government by another $1 billion for its continued support to FirstNet. The government selected AT&T to build the network in 2017, when the service was first known as the Nationwide Public Safety Broadband Network. Its creation was driven by the breakdown in emergency communications for public safety agencies and first responders in the aftermath of the terror attacks of September 11th, 2001.
In Pennsylvania, an important net has been connecting with others in the region, having a near vertical incident skywave antenna. Using the properties of the near vertical incident skywave antenna to their best advantage, members of the Red Cross of the Southeast Pennsylvania have been running a successful monthly net enabling other INCOM stations, municipal emergency centers, and interested operators to check in. The calls come from as close as the immediate region and from as far away as northern New Jersey, Delaware, and the greater New York area. The net is in fact all about the check-ins. Participants ask for call sign, name, location, and an accurate signal report. According to Cliff Hotchkiss, KC3PGT, the regional lead for the American Red Cross Disaster Services Training in Southeast Pennsylvania, these important records have been logged on the NVIS net since its startup almost a year and a half ago. Using the Southeast Pennsylvania Red Cross call sign, WA3ARC, the net operates from its communications trailer and welcomes anyone who wants to check in. Cliff said that when we started it for a dual purpose, first, we need to exercise and practice setting up our NVIS antenna and operating from our communications trailer. Second, we wanted to establish a frequency range and protocol to communicate with our neighboring Red Cross regions in case of widespread communication outage. Like so many other NVIS nets around the country, this net relies on the antenna's ability to establish connections with local and regional stations and has a maximum range of about 400 miles. Cliff said that it is useful for emergency communications on HF because unlike UHF and VHF nets, it does not rely on repeaters. This net takes place on the third Thursday of every month, which this month will be April 16th. Calls for check-ins begin about 10 a.m. Eastern Time on 40 meters on or below 7.235 megahertz.
A pair of cosmonauts, each in their own time, brought value to the realm of space exploration for their country. Alexandra Volkov, Uniform 4, Mike India Romeo, now retired, is a veteran of 3 launches, who later served as commander of the cosmonaut detachment at the Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center. Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexandra Grebenkin, Romeo 3, Hotel Papa, who has a radio communications engineering background, served as a mission specialist for SpaceX Crew 8 in 2024. Now that you are adding value to an event here on Earth that pays tribute to Yuri Gagarin and the trip 65 years ago that made him the first man in space. Both cosmonauts will be among the activators seeking QSOs with chasers on the 11th and 12th of April as part of an international DX contest honoring the Soviet cosmonaut and bearing his name. Contacts will be on HF via CW and SSB. The cosmonauts aren't just worth double multipliers for chasers, but earn them QSL cards bearing their autographs.
And our final story for you this week. A Florida ham with an experimental license is busy exploring propagation and its impact on the 4-meter and 8-meter bands. In the hope of gaining insights into seasonal propagation trends, sporadic E, trans-equatorial propagation, and low-band VHF path behavior, the experimental station, WQ2XDM, has been conducting experiments using the digital weak signal modes Whisper and FT8 on the 4-meter and 8-meter bands. The license was granted to John K9JMS, who is asking fellow hams to monitor reception and send him reports for data collection. He recommends using PSK Reporter and station logs and screenshots to record time, signal-to-noise ratio, grid, and frequency details while monitoring FT8 on 40.680 MHz. The station's website says John will publish a final white paper and open dataset. The location in Florida is key to the experimental activity because of the region's recurring tropospheric ducting in the Gulf and Atlantic region. Florida's low latitude makes it especially suitable for capturing trans-equatorial propagation and equatorial ionospheric phenomena. According to the station's page on QRZ.com, the project is aimed at strengthening the case for more interest and access to 8 meters. Unlike hams in a number of other countries such as Ireland, Slovenia, and South Africa, licensed amateurs in the U.S. do not have access to either the 8-meter or 4-meter bands. Signal reports or queries can be sent to John at the email address wq2xdm.effell@gmail.com.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 @gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeater systems all around the U.S. and around the world on great operations like WA0RCR from the center of the U.S., Wentzville, Missouri, where This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to be part of the legendary Gateway 160-meter net report each weekend.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.